Listen to the sultry sound of my voice.
What does sultry even mean? Does anyone know? Does anyone really know?
Sultry. I think it's like, who is that? Is it Barry Manilow or Barry White? You know, the really deep, just sort of like full, rich. Yeah. That seems like it's sultry to me.
I just looked it up and it says hot and humid.
Okay.
Oh, if you're talking about the air or the weather,
it's hot and humid.
It's hot and humid. If you're talking about a person attractive in a way that suggests a passionate nature.
Oh. Well,
maybe we have been using it right all this time.
Barry White, then, I'll tell you. I mean, that's his songs, right?
Oh my God. A passionate nature. It sounds so clinical when people say that. Welcome to the True North Podcast, where two practicing light workers get together every week to continue an ongoing conversation about wholeness and healing for body and mind so that you can follow your true north back to your true self.
I think you nailed it.
I'm Ryan.
And I'm Abby. Happy snow day in
Texas. Yes, it is. It is a snow day in Texas, and I'm choosing to be happy about it. We get like snow for a day, and we're like, yay! And then if it's as long as it's lasted, we're like, no, I want the summer again.
Oh no, not me.
At least that's how I am.
Not me. I'm like I'm on round 2 or 3 of like getting the sled out. I mean, even more so than my kid. My kid's like, can we go home? I'm like, one more run.
No, man, I used to go on an annual week-long snowboarding trip in the mountains up in Breck, and that's enough snow for me all year. I love it while I'm there, and then I love not that.
Then you are a true Texan.
Yeah. And so like I go outside and there's snow and like the first night it snowed, like we wake up and there's snow everywhere and it was magical and we wanted to go play in it and stuff, and I literally woke up, looked out the window, saw that the snow was still there, and rolled my eyes.
I got up and it was like cheering. Well, also jumping up and down because I didn't have power. So the house was really cold. So I'm like, hey, let's just go play in it. Get the snow clothes on and go outside.
What was that like, not having... I know most of the people I know are without power, and it's becoming this whole thing, and it's interesting to see how it's unfolding. But what was that like for you?
Yeah, for me, I can't really complain. Our house is newer, so it's really well insulated, and we have a fireplace. So in all honesty, like, other than the inconvenience of not having the internet to do work or having the oven to maybe cook some food, we have a gas stovetop, so it's like my family could still cook on the stovetop. We had heat through the fireplace. We had down comforters to sleep in. We all like to sleep in the cold anyway, so really it's like it wasn't that bad. There's a few things, like my pipes did freeze. I lost water in most of my faucets. I currently have a major leak in my attic, but it's all fixable. It's nothing that's ruining anything necessarily. So compared to probably what some other people are dealing with, it wasn't that bad. It's sort of, I actually loved it in a way because although I wasn't home for most of it, so my wife might say differently because she's had the child longer than I have, entertaining without the power, but it sort of forces you to slow down. Like, you don't even have the internet. You can't, and cell phone service was spotty, so it's not like you can just check out completely on your phone. I mean, it forces you to read or draw or get creative or go outside, and I don't know, I kind of like that part. Yeah.
That is the most Abby answer.
The most. What does that mean?
I don't know. I just like everything you're saying. It just kind of like on my inside, they're like, "Yep, that's pretty much how I would have expected Abby to handle
me to
being."
Yeah.
I mean, you're always going to the mountains as much as you can, and it feels like
Yeah. Right. The cold doesn't bother me. I mean, this is what I grew up in. I remember, going back to Graham's, like, I spent the majority of my time on the farm, and when we had these major blizzards come through, we would fill up the bathtub, we would fill up the sinks because the pipes did freeze. That's your water. You couldn't flush because everything, like everything froze. I mean, the power went out. We slept by the wood stove. It just, I don't know. It was magical. Like there's this time of just like the adults, I'm sure, are freaking out. You know, we don't have any water. But to me, I'm like, this is amazing. We're gonna drink out of the bathtub.
I have another friend who was without power, and they set up a blanket for it in front of the fireplace, like when they were kids, to keep all the heat in and stuff. And the cat was in there, and we had a chance to talk about it, and it sucked because she really hates the cold. But she was like, turn it into an adventure, and we'll have a story at the end of it. I'm
right?
like, man, like that's just such a great attitude to have. I think in times like these, people get closer to showing their true colors.
Oh,
so it's
definitely.
really interesting to see how different people are responding to this thing. And and then I had a friend in Houston who they don't have power. They didn't have power. They don't have a fireplace, and she's like in her second trimester.
Yeah.
And I was just like, man, like her house was 37 degrees.
Yep.
And I was sending her like, here's how to make a space heater with like a tea light candle and a potter. And she's like, I literally have nothing.
Right.
It was,
See, that's where I think of like the elderly people. It took me 3 attempts to get back to Dallas. I was recently in Denver and I couldn't get home. And when I finally got home and I'm driving home from the airport, like everything's shut down and there's homeless people out and about. And like it's the homeless people, it's the people with small babies that have no heat source, nowhere to go, no family. My dog's about to break down my door. Okay.
You can hear the panting.
Oh, geez. She's like, let me in. See, we're on a full snow day. Everybody's home.
Yep. The dogs don't know what's going on.
Right. What are we doing? Okay. So we have way better things to talk about than the snow, right?
We do.
Yeah.
I mean, we do. I didn't.
Although, yes, I don't want to like.
I don't want to be tone deaf and just act like it's not happening.
It's like I don't want to be dismissive about like these people that really yes, like I recognize that it is that there are people having a hard time going through this winter vortex that we seem to be in.
Who also, one of the cool, like I just wanted to mention this. There was a really cool thing that I saw. We have our neighbor across the street, and then one house over. She's an elderly lady who lives by herself, and when we moved in, she got us this like gift basket and this whole warm welcome, And as soon as we realized the situation, we were like, we should go check on her. So I looked out the window, and there's this blanket of snow everywhere. And I saw one set of footprints going from her neighbor's house, who's a guy about my age, over just in a straight line across to her front door. Oh. And then I noticed 2 sets of footprints taking a different route back to his house. Mm-hmm. And I took a picture of it because I was like, what a story. What a story. Like, that's... Yeah. It was so cool to see. All I had to do was look out the window and see evidence of humanity and community, and it just warmed me right up, Abby.
Well, that's the beauty in all this is like these times are not fun, but this is when humanity really comes into play. Just everybody checking on their neighbors and making sure people have, like, all of my friends have reached out, like, come over, charge your phone, get some coffee, sleep here, shower. I mean, there has not been, there's been an endless amount of invitations, which is it's just nice. It's really nice. Community coming together. So
it's great to see that happen.
Yeah, it really is. It is. I'm
trying to put my hands in the pockets of my plus-size lady cardigan.
Cozy sweater.
It is so... This has been my costume this entire time. Okay. So, this is for me now.
Okay.
We just did a 3-part series on using your voice. And the thing that strikes me about my experience of those last 3 episodes is how many times I chose not to use my voice out of fear. I don't even know fear of what. Just
rejection.
Lack of courage itself can become a habit. And so I don't even know if I dug into what the fear was of, per se. It's just that I went back and I listened to all 3 of those episodes. And I pinpointed every single time I wanted to say something, and I didn't because I was afraid to. And I don't even know that I was afraid of anything. I think we just all have conditions around, like, we were conditioned to be fearful of certain things. And maybe at one point in my life there was an of attached to it, but the of has since dissolved and all that's left is the fear. But it was still there, and it was still saying, like, no, Ryan, don't say this thing. And so I don't really know how to frame this, but one thing that I want to do, and I do think this is as much for the benefit of the audience as it is for me, just to see this in action, is to kind of like just go through those and just voice the things.
Okay.
Not to dig anything up or to unravel something that was already tied up or whatever. We certainly don't need to rehash all the things that we've been rehashing. And the week off, I think, was a good separation from all the emotions I was feeling around this. But at the end of the day, I think you and I sit in different places on some of these things. And I think it's at least worth it to note that. Not to say that one of us is right or the other one is wrong, but I really do think that both of us are portraying our sentiments on the topic as a reflection of where we are in life. And I think for me to voice and note those differences is important. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Am I saying that right? Okay. So I have these. I'm looking off to the side because I have them all written down. Okay. I did my homework. I did all my little prep work. Because, good Lord, do I know how to turn a rabbit trail into a rabbit hole, and I want to stay on topic. So, the first place that I didn't say what I wanted to say was when you said, you don't want to craft your voice so as not to trigger a person that you know really well when you're talking. And I said, uh-huh. And what I wanted to say was, yes, I do. I do. I always do. And we hadn't yet gotten into all the things that are backed there that's built upon. But one thing that I noticed was there were a couple places where you mentioned what happens when we don't use our voice, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a very real motivator. Is that if you don't use your voice, there are things like stagnance. There are things like not moving forward. You could produce illness in your body and like you're walking on eggshells. But one of the things I wanted to point out was that the way that was hitting me was it seems like encouraging someone to use their voice for fear of what happens if they don't feels on the same level as someone not using their voice for fear of what might happen if they do. Does that make sense? Like, they both feel like fear. It's all, like, I don't know if you were saying this, but I was hearing one element was use your voice because if you don't, it could be worse for you than if you do.
But those are both fear, but one of them is real and one of them is perceived fear. And to me, that's the difference.
Which one's which?
The perceived fear is not using your voice at all because you don't know what's going to happen, so you don't say anything. Well, you're still never going to know because you never used your voice. But in using your voice, because it requires vulnerability and it requires courage, there is fear there because you can still be rejected. You could still get hurt. You could still be hurting somebody. But the fear then, that fear is there, but it is a real fear then that can come to a resolution. It can be processed in your body because whatever's going to happen is then going to happen and you will have to then have that experience to either fix it, work through it, whatever the case may be.
So what if you don't use your voice and none of the bad things happen as a result? Like the bad things that would happen to you as a result of not using your voice.
Well, I think it would depend on what is it that you are saying. Because if what you are saying is, I will give you an example. I am in a group of friends that are very much on the same, the four of them are on the same side of this COVID issue and vaccine issue, and I am on the opposite side. We are not in the middle. They don't know that because I have never spoken my truth. because I don't want them to feel like I'm judging them. I don't want them to feel like I am discrediting any of their beliefs or their values. So I don't say anything. So it's actually getting worse to now spend time with them because it feels like our relationship is built on a false foundation. Because every time they say something and I don't say anything back, my silence basically says that I think the same thing, and I don't. And so in that situation, to me, not speaking my truth, and this is why I said it depends on what you have to say, might keep me safe, might keep me in the group, but it certainly doesn't, I don't stand up for myself. It hurts me. I don't feel like it's a trustworthy relationship anymore. And that's on me, right? Because I'm the one that's not speaking up. Whereas if I speak my truth in that situation and I say it from a perspective of love and light, and let's define what that is. It's not, well, that's your president, or you think this, or, where it's very defensive, like I'm going to get them on the defensive, then that is not love and light. But if I approach it as, well, this is how I feel, this is why it bothers me, this is the research that I've done. I'm not saying that your opinion is wrong. It's just that I feel differently, and here's why. Here's what I've learned, and then sharing that information. And so I guess that's where I'm saying, like, it just depends on what it is that you're saying, what it is you have to say. Because in that case, like, if it's not hurting you, then yeah, that might be better not to say something. Like, if it's not going to affect you down the road.
See, I wish I had asked that when you first said it. That makes a lot of sense to me. Not in the I wasn't listening part, but in the that makes a lot of sense to me. So the answer to a lot of these, because I want to come at this with questions and curiosity instead of just like, here's what I wish I had said, because what I wish I had said was a question. But I'm already getting a sense that a lot of the answers to this is going to be like, it depends on the situation, it depends on the person, it depends on the thing, it depends on the why, and it depends on you.
Yes, it does. It absolutely depends on. And maybe I guess I just assumed that when we started talking about this, that was made known.
It's so hard to, it's hard to have these conversations without disclaiming every single, it's hard to remember to disclaim every single thing, you don't want to have a conversation about the conversation, you just want to have it. But then that's where we get into this territory. Like I was hearing, like, when I really, really dug down, instead of going point by point, one thing that I was hearing from you was that this is the way. Like the second episode, when I mentioned that you had a disclaimer at the beginning, but I missed it. Someone else might have missed it. So let's spend a whole episode just on that disclaimer. And we had the fish tank analogy, and tend to the water, and tend to the fish, and all that stuff. Even at the end of that, what I was hearing you say was the love and light, like be in love and light, and then you don't have to choose your words, because any word that you've made available to you is only going to be best case scenario. And we kind of dug into that. At the end of that episode, I just wanted to say I still didn't agree with the whole premise, but I didn't. And I don't, okay. But I just, like, going back to the fish tank analogy, I really just feel like tend to your water and tend to your fish, but those are two separate things. Like, tending to one doesn't mean you don't have to tend to the other. And I heard you saying that at different parts, that choosing your word matters. But I was feeling tension there, because I was hearing at some points you were saying things that led me to believe that you were saying, don't worry about choosing your words. And other points I was hearing you saying, choose your words. And I think that was kind of a tension I found myself caught in. I didn't even know what to respond to or how.
Not choosing your words, though, is making the assumption that you are already in love and light, which means your intentions are already. So I guess when I was saying that, I was making the assumption that you had the other person's best interest at heart. I am definitely not condoning anybody just using words and not thinking about it.
Right. And I think, and this is like so in the weeds, I don't even know if it's helpful for anybody, but to me, choosing your words intentionally all the time is a part of what it means to me in love and light. Does that make sense?
Right. Like, I don't know, I guess I just approach it differently, because if you are in love and light, that's already a given that you're going to do that. So it doesn't require a mindful effort.
But the mindful effort is the love and light. That's like saying, if you're already choosing your words, then you don't have to choose your words.
To me, see, but here's how I feel about it. Like this is like, it's taken me years to like get to this place. And I think sitting in love and light, it is a constant practice because it's not how we're hardwired, but I think it can become practice enough where it almost becomes rote. And so
doesn't that bump up against our life as practice thing though?
Right. I'm still practicing because there are times when I find, like we've talked about this, where I'm not in it. I get bumped out of it for whatever reason. I was bumped out of it this morning, just by a comment. And so, yeah, it takes practice to kind of like, all right, bring the energy back up, just let it go, work through it. But when it's something as important as speaking your truth on the line, I'm already there. Like, especially if we talk about my friend group, like if I were to come back and say how I really feel, I would like 100% just be there because these people really matter to me. And I don't want to lose them, and I don't want to hurt their feelings.
So why aren't you?
Because I'm scared. I am afraid. I am afraid that I am the lone fish and that I will be the one that gets ousted from the group. And we're herd animals. I don't want to be kicked out of the group. So that's a very real fear. But on the flip side, it feels much worse not to be. Because here's the thing, I'm not alone. Maybe I'm alone in that group, but I'm not alone in another group. And so either that means they open their hearts and they sit in love and light, and we can agree to disagree. We can share information and try to learn from each other. Or they can say, this doesn't work for me, and they can reject me and not ask me to come back to the group, in which case then I have to realize that, okay, maybe these aren't my people like I thought they were, and feel the heartache of that loss and move on. And that's the really hard thing, because really on the other side, it doesn't feel good not for them to know where I am. It doesn't feel good.
Right. And so that's what you were saying earlier with one of those fears is real and one of them is projected. Mm-hmm.
Because right now, my mind, my figment, my lizard is saying, the minute you open your mouth, they're kicking you out of the group. I don't know that. They're good people. In all honesty, they might say, okay, tell us your research. What do you know? Like, I want to learn from you. Why do you think that? That could be a possibility, but I don't know until I actually try. So it is this perceived fear because I'm already making up the story of what they're going to do. Right.
And we do that all the time. Like, I think we do that without even realizing that that's what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So I think like that brings me to the gender thing.
Well, hold on. Before you, I don't want to move on just yet, because I do want to acknowledge the fact that you and I are kind of saying the same thing, but also not. And I think you are right that maybe it does have to do with where we are in our lives right now. I'm not a talker. I'm we are very opposite in that you do verbally process. Like you're constantly working things through out loud. Nothing wrong with that. I don't. I'm already working things in internally before I even open my mouth. And so maybe that's the difference. Maybe there is something to be said for people who speak less just naturally and who speak more naturally. Maybe you are saying, for those of you that do have a tendency to kind of verbally process, maybe it is that practice of just crafting your words. And maybe what I'm saying is for those of us that kind of already do that, it's like does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Like I experience you as being, part of your story is that there are a lot of influences in your life for the entirety of your life, giving you very compelling reasons not to use your voice. Mm-hmm. And so for you to come into your power is to push through those and use it anyway. Mm-hmm. And so you're going to go on a podcast and just, preach from the hilltops, use your voice, use your voice, use your voice. Mm-hmm. I have lived a life where people encourage me to use my voice to the point where I do it habitually and mindlessly most of the time. Mm-hmm. I don't know if me being a verbal processor is nature or nurture or some combination of both. And so for me to come into my power is to have the courage to not need to respond to something. And let my silence speak for itself. I don't know who said this. There was a theologian. I think it was a theologian. I get in trouble for saying I don't know who said this, but I can look at the internet one moment, please. If necessary, use. Okay. So this came from my upbringing in a church. Oh, St. Francis. Okay, he's a kind of a heavy hitter. So St. Francis is quoted as saying, "Preach the gospel at all times. When necessary, use words." And the first time I heard that, it like branded itself on my heart because of how hard it hit me. And I would pivot that, as presumptuous as that sounds, to express your truth. If necessary, use words. And so for me, with my story, with who I am and how I am, for me to figure out how to express my truth using as few words as possible is for me to come into my power. And then, of course, I'm going to go onto a podcast and say, be careful with every single word you choose and ask yourself if it's really necessary, helpful, kind, productive, all those things. And if it's not, then don't. You know? So both of us come at this saying, here's the thing. But what we're really doing is we're saying, here's the thing for the people with our stories, with our experiences, who's in our buckets, because we're in two very different buckets. And we even ran into this in our tribe. We had one person in our tribe who discovered assertiveness, who does not have a history of being assertive, and then is like, assertiveness is the best thing ever. Everybody should be assertive all the time. It solves all your problems because it's solving all of their problems. We had another person who has been assertive their whole life and like, I'm really careful with my assertiveness. Very selective. And there was a little bit of a back and forth until we were able to tease it out and say, you're each speaking to your own experience. Neither one's right. Neither one's wrong. They're both the thing that works for you. And so I think one of the things that kept me from being able to just walk away from this three-parter was that what I was hearing from you was that the model you were putting forward for when, how, and why, and where to use your voice was the universal model for people. But me, coming from my background, that's not the model that works best for me. I didn't really know how to address that without it coming off as me just arguing with you or trying to change your mind or shut you down. And again, this is kind of why I wanted to bring it into the gender thing, because I think maybe that has to do with the fact that I'm a man and you're a woman, and I'm very conscientious of that. I'm very conscientious of, are my words going to disempower this person, shut them down, talk over them, displace them for any reason? And maybe that's what it was. Maybe that's why I didn't say what I wanted to say when I wanted to say it, because I didn't yet have a way to say it that wouldn't come off as me just arguing and trying to usurp your words with mine. You know?
Yeah. Sure.
And and again, we don't. Am I coming off that way right now?
No.
Am I bringing a "you're wrong and I'm right" energy?
No, not as black and white as that. You're telling me that you feel differently than I feel, but I'm also agreeing with you that I am now realizing that we're also coming at it from two very different perspectives that aren't really about male, female.
I think they're informed by it. I mean, they couldn't not be. Because I also think that a big reason why I've always been encouraged to use my voice is because of the white male thing. Okay. And I think a big part of why our culture has told you not to use yours for the sake of however others might feel comes from the fact that you're a woman. I think those are two systemic mechanisms that I see in play that I can't believe that we aren't affected by. You know? Yeah. And even you, when you were talking about how you opened up part 2 by saying you wanted to speak your truth, and I instead took the reins from you and spoke what I thought your truth was going to be so that I didn't have to hear it from you, was a very male power move. And when you said that you were when you were on the fence about whether or not to bring it up, but someone else already did, what you said was that you were even thinking about framing it in the male-female context.
Yes.
Because that's in there. That's in there somewhere.
Yeah, right.
And so I am a big fan of women hearing this podcast and hearing your voice saying, speak up. Don't worry about if it makes other people uncomfortable. And I'm also on the same page, a big fan of men hearing this podcast and hearing me say, hold your tongue, unless what you have to say is really, 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 really important.
Sure.
Because then you're holding people in my cast are holding space for the people in your cast to take up more space. Mm-hmm. Which is important. That's an important thing for people to get from this. I don't think any social interaction is not at least a little bit informed by the male-female dynamic.
Oh, most definitely. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think part of it is I spent the whole episode railing against the patriarchy, so now I do have a fear of coming off as in any way remotely misogynistic in our interactions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But I'm also just that way in general. I just...
there is an author, I'm not going to share the body of work that this came from, but she made a really interesting point where talking about this whole thing, going back to the episode where I said I have my truth to speak, and then you did all the speaking of my truth, where, that's what you did, but I didn't come back and correct that. Like, I'm also part of the problem because I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm just going to let him roll with this. Right. Like that's also a very interesting point that, you can say that, but I also have 50% of the responsibility in not showing up in that moment and calling you out on that. I don't like to use that language. I'm not going to say that again.
Calling you out?
Yeah. Because it's not something you've done wrong. I guess I just wanted to bring it to your attention, right?
Right.
You weren't intending to hurt my feelings or doing it, you know what I mean? So I just... but to bring it to your attention, I'm 50% of that. I was aware of that. I told you that. And then I even afterward told you I was on the fence about whether or not I was going to tell you. And then had no one brought it up and I didn't tell you, then it would have just gone on and maybe have happened again. Right. So,
right.
I'm not completely innocent in this whole thing either. So I think that's important to make. Now, maybe my side is harder. I don't know. We could argue that, because what happens if I come back and say that and then you find yourself defensive and there's fear on that for me to even say that too. But
right.
I don't know.
Well, think about how much of a power move it was for Kamala to just say, I'm speaking.
Yes.
Right? That phrase is on T-shirts now.
Right.
That's like borderline revolutionary for a woman to tell a man, hey, I'm still talking. Mm-hmm. Right? So
I'm doing it in a way in love and light because seriously, that, even in my mind, I'm like, tell him to shut the fuck up, right? And instead, she's just like, I'm speaking. It was so assertive and strong, but yet in love and light, you are not going to shut me down. I was like, yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I would not. I mean, my buttons were pushed and I wasn't even in the middle of the conversation.
Everyone I know who was watching it was just feeling something. No one watched that indifferently.
Yeah.
But the fact that that's such a big deal shows how much work we have to do as men and as a society
absolutely.
To not create occasion for women to have to tell a man that she's still talking. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That... So I'm getting upset again. I'm trying to...
Let's come back to your points. Next.
Okay, so one thing I got from you from both the podcast and the Facebook group was, and this isn't something I'm quoting from you directly, it's just a sentiment I got from a bunch of different things you said, so I'm first asking for clarification before, but it's an idea that if you can't control how people are going to react to what you say, and you can't predict how they're going to react to what you say, you can't care how they're going to react to what you say. You can't control it. You can't predict it. So you can't factor it in. Is that... How does that land on you? Is that where you are, or is that just what I've been hearing?
It's where I am, but when you say it with that tone, that's not what I mean.
How would you rephrase what I just said?
Because when you care about how they're going to react, you're sitting in their business. And if you sit in their business, then most likely you're going to change the way that you show up. And so when you speak your truth and when you are staying in your business, you are caring about the other person and how they might react or respond to you, but in a way where you're only controlling your energy. You're only controlling how you show up. And if you're doing that, if you are mindful about how you're showing up, if you're mindful about being in love and light, you're mindful about speaking your words from that place of love and light, which is already just the me statements, not defensive, blaming, shaming statements, then you are staying in your business. And at that point, if you are there, then how they respond isn't on you. Like, all you can really do is control your delivery, your energy, the way you show up. That's all you can control. And that's the only thing that you should worry about.
And if you are already organizing your thoughts and delivery in a way that
It's
to the
caring.
best of your ability comes across as loving the person, caring, having empathy, and being compassionate, that's the point at which... Well,
because what if you do? What if you're in that place and you deliver your message? Let's go back to my friend example. And I state my point of view, loving them as my friends, and letting them know that I'm on the opposite side of the fence on how they feel. And I know the intention that I put into how I feel, and they still get mad or frustrated with me. I can't control that. I can't change that. It sucks. That's my fear, is that they'll be mad or upset, but I cannot worry about that, because the minute I worry about it, I won't say a thing. Or I'll say it differently, or I won't speak my full truth, so I'll half agree with you, or, fill in the blank.
So instead of you can't control their reaction, you can't predict their reaction, so you can't care about their reaction, it's you can't control how they react, so don't try. You can't predict how they'll react, so don't try, but definitely care.
Yeah. It's a good way to put it.
Okay, so then
but caring is love and light. That's
right.
That's the point that I feel has been missed, is everyone thinks I'm not caring about the other person. That is not what I'm saying. If you're in love and light, that's what you're doing. You're holding the other person in their highest good, which is love. That's the love part.
Okay, so I'm trying to connect this to something, because there is a truth that I've been needing to speak to someone, and I have spent at least a year of weekly therapy sessions and conversations with trusted loved ones, working out how to just do this, how to have this conversation. And I haven't had it yet, but it's not because of fear of what might happen that's out of my control. It's fear of what might happen that is within my control. And what I mean by that is I'm taking as much time as I need to figure out the most love and light way to open up this communication. And I'm at a point right now where I still don't think that what I have playing out in my head is the best option. I think there are angles I could look at it from. There are things I could take into consideration. There's healing that I need to do before I can access the parts of me that are going to be able to not just open the floor, but continue it for as long as it needs to go, And so I kind of feel like I'm being intentional about not speaking yet, just because I want to make sure I do it in love and light.
But then I have two questions to ask you. The first one is it fair then that you've spent the last year, or not fair, let me back up, is it caring to the other person that you've spent the last year not having this conversation with them?
I mean, the good thing is our lives are tied together, but we don't really interact very much.
Okay.
Like I was at their house last night, and I said I had interactions with everybody else in the house except for them. Like I have relationships with everybody that they're in a relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't really have any relationship to them.
So then,
and I'm holding it off because I'm still at a point where I feel like engaging with them would I don't know that I can stay in love and light throughout the entirety of the engagement.
okay.
You know? And so I haven't spoken up. I'm kind of holding them at arm's length on purpose. And again, it's not because I'm afraid of what they'll do with my words, but I'm afraid of me delivering words that are less than the best that could then add fuel to the fire instead of...
So then you kind of already answered my question, because then I'm guessing that whatever this is that you need to talk about doesn't really have to do with the other person.
Well, I mean,
it's
it's kind
something
of like
that
what
they're
I'm doing now.
triggering
It's
in you.
kind of a little bit of like, hey, we have a history, we have a past. There are some things I didn't say because they would have just made things worse. I didn't say them. But it still needs to get addressed. I think things still need to get addressed.
So then, I guess I don't understand what you're afraid of that would be within your control, because because if you get defensive, we know what that means. If you're getting defensive in the middle of the conversation when you're saying what you need to say, then there's something being triggered in you.
But that's what's in my control.
Yes.
And I think I'm still working out the words I'm going to use and the way I'm going to use them and the context and the setting, because that is within my control.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think that if I were to go into it right now, I would, even with firing on all my cylinders, it still may set the stage for a conversation that might go awry. When I know in the back of my head that if I had given it more time to flesh it out, I could have entered us into something that had let fewer chances of, it going south.
But you've suffered through this for a year.
Well, see, that's the thing, is I don't count it suffering. That's why I asked, like, fear of not saying something, like the pain of not speaking your truth, isn't that just as self-inflicted on you as the pain they would feel from you speaking your truth? Like we talk about how if you're in love and light and you speak your truth and they are triggered by it and they suffer because of it, then that's on them. But couldn't also then be argued that if I have a truth to speak and I don't speak it and I suffer,
mm-hmm.
isn't that suffering on me? Isn't there a way to not speak your truth from neither fear nor love, but rather just utility or some other reason that doesn't have all these other labels on it? And isn't there a way to, like, can't it also be argued that that me suffering as a result of me not speaking my truth is my own choice, and I can just as easily choose not to suffer and let things just be what they are?
Well, you made a really good point. So perhaps then this person, so we have, like, we talk about our inner tribe, that inner circle of people that we are most closest to, and people can move in and out of that. And then sort of these layers of circles sort of keep going out where there are people in our lives that are strangers. There are people in our lives that are acquaintances. There are people in our lives that they're closer, but they're still at arm's length. And so it sounds like to me, like, not speaking your truth was more kind of like what we talked about with one of our tribe members, where you're setting a boundary. Perhaps this person, like, it's not suffering necessarily, but you've made a choice to keep this person in your outer circle because they are not an inner circle person. And I don't think you have to. So in this case, like, no, maybe not speaking your truth simply just means you've put the boundary in place that this person is not in your inner circle. End of story, you move on. But to me, what I'm hearing you say is that you're spending a lot of energy crafting a conversation when I'm not even sure. Like, and I don't know the details. It's hard to do this on the podcast, right? You know, because I understand
Right.
like we're trying to be vague and not reveal people's personal experiences. But,
Right.
you know, so to me, it's like, I hear you spending energy on this, which is why I made the assumption that you might be suffering from it, when really what you might be saying is, I have a boundary in place, and maybe you still need to say what you want to say, but you know, if you're putting the boundary in place that this person's not in your inner circle, to me, I would want to know more. Like, why don't you just say it and put the boundary in place, or just not say it, have the boundary, and don't come back to
Right.
those kinds of conversations? You know, I'm not sure.
I think the thing that makes all this sticky for me is that I do love them and I want them in my inner circle. I want
Are
a
they-
healthy version of them to be in the inner circle of a healthy version of me.
But is that
And so
possible?
I'm motivated to where I think it is. I just want it to be done in a way that's most conducive to that outcome. And now the word outcome, to me, is attaching to the fact that I'm attached to an outcome, which is very not.
Well, and because you can't, that's
I
where
am.
your
I
fear
am
comes
attached to
from.
the
Like, you're
outcome.
worried
I
that the
am.
outcome isn't going to go that way, and then your words are going to slip.
Right, or the reason that the outcome didn't go that way was within my control, and I didn't take enough time to craft my delivery in a way that boosted those chances. And so I think that's why I'm still attached to it, and that's why I'm still working it out, and that's why I'm still talking to my therapist about it, because there's stuff that we have to move through to get there, but I want to get there, so I want to move through it, and it's not going to be fun. It's not going to be easy. And so, but I mean, I don't even know where we got. Oh, you know what? And this actually goes to the next point. At the very end of, not the very end, but near the end of the last one, we were talking about rupture and repair.
Mm-hmm.
About how you rupture a thing, and what's more important after the rupture is the repair. I do think the repair is incredibly important, and I think oftentimes we rupture and we don't repair, and that sucks. And that's a bad example for everybody that we're an influencer on, including our kids. I do think I'm more motivated to avoid a rupture. I and that's part of this too, is I'm trying to figure out how to do this in a way that minimizes, within my control, the chances of not just causing a rupture, but adding to a rupture that's still kind of an open wound for everybody involved.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I look back and think there are ways to have handled this in the past that wouldn't have even caused this rupture in the first place. Not that I am placing all the sole responsibility on myself, but I am taking responsibility for my contribution. And I can't know for sure that what things would be like had I sat in love and light the whole time. Mm-hmm. But I do think that at the time I wasn't motivated to avoid rupture. And through this experience now I am. Like, the repair is important, but it's just as important to find a way to speak your truth that doesn't sacrifice the truth of your truth, but also does everything in your power to avoid the rupture in the first place.
Right, but then I feel like, again, you're trying to control the outcome. And I think this is, again, a wrong assumption about what I said, where it's okay to rupture. I have never said it's okay to rupture. I don't go into a conversation like this that's hard, like with my friends, knowing there's going to be a rupture. There's a fear that there's going to be a rupture. I don't know if there's going to be a rupture. I don't want a rupture. But the repair is the antidote to the rupture, because I can't control the outcome, and I can't control how they're going to react. I just can't. And if I say it in not my best possible way, loving them at the same time, and there's still a rupture, even though I didn't want one, the repair is the tool to try to get our relationship back so that I don't lose them.
Right.
And to make them still feel like they're loved and that I'm not judging them, or you know, whatever feelings or stories they get around what I said. So, you know, it's not just okay to rupture. That's not what I'm saying. But it does happen.
Yeah. And oftentimes, it's kind of like these are linked because the rupture usually happens, at least in some part, because I'll speak for myself. When I experience a rupture, usually there are multiple things involved, but I can almost assuredly say that I wasn't at my best. Mm-hmm. Again, not to jump as far as saying if I was, then the rupture wouldn't have happened. Mm-hmm. But then when you do the repair, you have to be at your best. Mm-hmm. Or else it may just turn into another rupture.
Right.
And that's where I've been with this particular incredibly cryptic situation I'm talking about, where I want to repair. And I want to be as intentional with the repair as I was unintentional with the rupture. Mm-hmm. But it's hard. And in the whole meantime, I am not saying a damn word.
What happens when rupture? Like, what is rupture? What do we mean by that? What are we talking about? Well, it's typically when the other person gets defensive about what you're saying. Right? Like, whatever you said.
Or if I'm just being
triggered
an
them,
asshole.
Offended them. Yeah, I mean, right. Well, whatever, but whether the person that's using their mind or using their truth in whichever way, let's say they're blowing off their ego and yeah, they are just an asshole. There is going to be rupture on the other side, but sometimes even not, even in love, there's rupture on the other side. But if there's rupture, whether from you or there's rupture from them, obviously somebody's been triggered in some way. And, that's a big cue. Like if I speak my truth and I come at it from a place of love and caring about what I'm saying and how I'm showing up with those words, and there's still rupture, that's like a big red flag for me. Like, what button did I just push? Right? Because that wasn't what I meant. That's not what I said. So obviously they've got some limiting beliefs that they're falling back on. And then that's where the repair comes in, because I started asking questions. I try to figure out.
That's the difference.
Okay.
When you say something undergirded by the assumption that you're in love and light and compassion with them, and they react badly or they're triggered, what I just heard you say is that you immediately go to what happened in them that caused the breakdown.
Yes, if I'm in love and light. Now, if not, then I will immediately get defensive. But this is where I know going into these conversations, if I stay in love and light, I immediately think this isn't about me.
How do you know? Because my first response, if someone's triggered, is to assume that I wasn't as much in love and light as I thought I was. I can go into it thinking that I've done my meditation, use all my tools, I've done all the things, feel nothing but love and compassion for them, I said the words, and in my mind I did all the things that I needed to do to make sure I was in love and light. And then it still falls apart. My first inclination is to say, oh, I was wrong about whether or not I was in love and light. Obviously, I wasn't. Because there's a nerve that I didn't... But then that's an external
locus of control. Then that means you're relying on somebody else to verify that information for you. So if you don't know, like if you think you did and you went into it and you're like, I did, and then they didn't respond the way you thought they would, you thinking that you're wrong is like somebody else not knowing you at all. Like I would ask. My answer to that is if you're like, wow, I thought I did that right, and they acted that way, like, what is it that I said? Like, really listen to their story about what they're coming back with. Mm-hmm. Because I think everybody should know when they're in love and light. But that doesn't mean that it's always that the other person's going to receive it that way.
Right.
You don't know. You really don't know.
I mean, there have just been so many times I thought I was, and feedback is really, I value feedback a lot. In case that isn't clear to everybody, because you can't see the label from inside the bottle. And there have been so many times in my life that I've been blind to something about how I've been showing up. And I've gotten feedback that has caused me to question. And the answer to that question has been, actually, yeah, I could have been showing up better. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's what my life has been. And there are also times, in addition to that, concurrently, where people have been triggered for their own reasons. But it's always been a both and. There's always been, I don't know that I can point to a single interaction. I can point to a single interaction that I've had where things went south, and I don't actually think I contributed anything to the southness of where it went. I don't, because there's always something for me that I could have done better. There's always feedback of a blind spot that I didn't see, or something I thought I was doing that I wasn't, or...
But in that moment, were you doing the best that you could with what you had available?
It's
in that
impossible
moment
to say.
You most likely
I mean,
you were. If you're showing up,
I was.
Right. So you can't go back and change that. And now maybe after the feedback, you've found some growth. But then that means you don't ever trust yourself. Like if you constantly are going back
how
and
do you
saying,
know? I don't. I mean, that's really what's at the root of it. I have a really, really, really hard time knowing for sure.
Because I think it's really about trusting yourself. Like, I have to trust myself. I will be better tomorrow than I am today. And I know that. I will be better next week than I am today. I am growing. I'm constantly learning. I'm also getting the feedback that helps me sort of, shift gears, navigate the train, whatever the case may be. But if I don't trust myself in this moment that I am doing the very best I can when I'm mindful about it, then what the heck are we doing? Right?
Well,
and then we're not staying in our own business. We're not staying in our own power if we're not trusting ourselves. I'm not saying we won't do it better tomorrow. We probably will.
We need to do another episode on the business thing, because I did this. Well, not just the business thing, but on me. I'll say this. I have gone through a little bit of a weird pivot in the last couple of months. Remember when I was talking about welcoming home all the parts of me I've exiled? Mm-hmm. To me, where I'm at with it, and this may just be me penduluming off into no man's land and I'll find a happy medium, but that means, like we talked about the dark wolf and the light wolf, that means welcoming the dark wolf back home. We talk about soul and ego, that means letting the ego have a seat at the table. That's, and so there's all these, I'm thinking maybe there's some room to be in other people's business. Not owning their problems or trying to make their stuff our own stuff, but I mean, I don't know. I think the feedback I've gotten in my life about me from other people has been instrumental in my own personal development to become a better version of myself.
But listen, as long as it doesn't become a crutch, though, where you have to have the external validation to know anything about yourself. That's not your true north. That's the rub,
is that's hard for me to tease those out. Because the second I discover something about myself on my own, the first thing I do is I go to my trusted sounding boards and I say, hey, poke holes in this.
But fair enough. Because then, but that doesn't mean like, oh, well, so-and-so said that, so now I believe that to be true, even if you might have been leaning a different direction. Like, the feedback is fantastic. I totally agree. That's what a tribe is for. Like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. I feel like I do this. Poke holes in it, right? Tell me your thoughts. Does that sound like me? Yes, getting that feedback, but you can still say, no, that doesn't feel right to me. Like, don't just get the feedback and then that's the only thing you rely on. Right? Like,
right. And I don't take the feedback and then say, okay, you're right. I was wrong. And what you just said is the truth. Like, I don't buy it, but it is something, it's a really big element in the equation for me.
And that, great.
Which then,
use it
when
for knowledge.
Right. And then when I am under the impression that I am doing the best I can, and then rupture happens, and I go back and I reinvestigate. Even if the rupture is the only feedback I get, even if no one tells me their experience or what they thought of me, it's all just like someone was triggered, and that's all the feedback I get. Mm-hmm. When I go back and I look at how I showed up, I always find a way I could have showed it better.
Well,
Which of course, why would I then trust myself? Because every time I go into it, I think I'm at my best.
Because
and then only retrospectively do I find out that I wasn't. So then I realize that I like time and time again, I have all these memories of thinking I was at my best and then not being. So if in this moment I think I'm at my best, the only thing I can really, really put stock in is that some future version of me is going to look back at now and see how I wasn't at my best in a way that I couldn't see now.
Right, but then you're making this black and white, and you're saying then that in all these experiences you've failed. Like you've given yourself no room, and then when something goes south, you're immediately thinking, well, I didn't do my best. Like you've just
Well,
created this story.
Failure is just the first attempt at learning.
That exactly.
So this is my growth. This is how I grow. This is by critiquing my past. But there's this looming idea that a future me is going to critique me, and I just like it's that's just
right. But see talk about perception. Okay, you can go back and say, yeah, I now knowing in retrospect I could have shown up a little bit differently. I ruptured that and I caused this kind of trauma, whatever, blah blah blah. Or you can show up and say, yeah, I probably didn't do the best I could. At least I know how to do it better now, and I now know how to go and repair that relationship. I can go back and act that way. I can go back and say the things that I didn't say. I can go back and make sure that person still feels loved. Like, because right now it just feels like you're constantly failing. You're telling yourself I fail all the time, and I that's not self-love.
I don't know. I will say that's in there, but I don't know that I paint that as a bad thing. I mean, there's the fail fast and innovate mentality where failing means you're trying. Like I don't think it's an indictment on myself that I fail all the time.
Okay, failing is
also
fine.
Feel like I fail all the time.
Feeling like a failure or saying that you are a failure is different than saying I fail all the time. I want to fail all the time.
What I do is I'm really careful to say always and never statements. I am in the habit of holding space to find out at a later date that right now I'm not doing as well as I think I am. And what that does is it causes me to really, really, really do my best to work out if I really am. Mm-hmm. I mean, the last 3 podcasts I would be like, oh, that was a good recording, and then I listened to it. And I think to myself, oh, I didn't show up as my best. And then the feedback confirms that. Mm-hmm. And then, and then here we are with me actually having typed up a list of all the ways that I could have showed it better. And I don't know that this is technically a repair because I wouldn't call this past month a rupture. Maybe it was a rupture between me and me. Because I did sit in suffering over the fact that I was not communicating the way I wanted to and all that stuff. But I don't even call that a failure either. Because now we have this. We have a hour of me saying things that I spent a month being afraid to say. Mm-hmm. But then this is the double-edged sword is now I feel like I'm going to release it tomorrow and then listen to it.
So what if you feel good about this and you get negative feedback about it tomorrow? Are you then going to say, well, I still didn't show up as my best, even though I was trying to show up as my best?
Oh, I guess it depends on the feedback, who it's from and what they say.
So we're going back to relying on feedback instead of internal. I don't know if it's
relying. I think it's just incorporating.
Okay.
I definitely intend to incorporate feedback. At least, if nothing else,
sure,
it prompts me to go and reinvestigate things that I may not have otherwise revisited. And some of those things are where I find growth opportunities.
I do not plan to show up as my best in every situation because then I think I'm expecting myself to be perfect. And I did that in my 20s. It didn't work out so well. I'm not usually my best. I don't think that's human nature, right?
Yeah.
I think that's why it's so important to practice being in love and light and following your true north, because then I have a better shot at showing up as my best self. But it can still happen that I don't. So.
I feel like both of us revealed 2 very big benchmark things for ourselves. We both have a conversation with someone that we aren't having.
Yeah.
At some point we're going to be like, okay, we both had the thing. How did it go? High five and debrief,
mm-hmm.
little landmarks, benchmarks in the future to show that growth. Mm-hmm. And now that it's out there on the internet and in front of you, now I feel like this sense of accountability.
Right. Now I have to go
to get on it and go do it. By next week, we're going to debrief how these conversations went.
Don't hold your breath.
That's a terrible idea.
There's still
That's a
fear there.
terrible idea. You talk to my person and I'll talk to your people. And then,
Okay.
you know.
All right.
What are you grateful for?
I am, last weekend I spent in the mountains in Colorado. Yearly I go on an annual trek to the mountains with my sister, where we kind of leave behind our spouses and our kids because we never just get one-on-one time, and we laugh and we dance and just talk about life. And my mom has joined us in the last few years, and this year, you know, it was her mother, Graham's, that passed away, and just she's having a whole bunch of struggle as well as the rest of us. And it's just been tough. And she wasn't going to come out this year, and she was kind of disappointed about it. She had a lot of work stuff to catch up on. And, you know, it's like we're all trying to cope with this. And I just didn't feel like any of us were doing it effectively. And I said to my mom that, you know, we really need this breath of fresh air. I hope you come. You know, I don't want to put the pressure on you to come, but we just need to go and cry and be mad and laugh and talk to each other, because we are that inner circle for each other, and not judge the other person for how they show up, and just be. And they both did. They both did. And I feel like we came out of the weekend just, yeah, there's still a shit storm going on. We still have feelings we have to deal with, but we finally took a breath. And I'm just grateful that, you know, the three of us trust each other enough to just hold that space for the other two, so that we can start healing and kind of coming back to where we need to be. So I'm grateful for
beautiful.
The two of them saying yes and showing up. So.
It's so rare to just extend an invitation for someone to just feel the things.
Yeah.
And for them to say, yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That shows how trusted you are.
Thank you.
I am grateful for... I'm trying to find it. I have a website open right next to the definition of sultry. Well, first of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't say I'm grateful that our heating never turned off.
Yeah,
the entire Texas storm. Almost everybody I know did. And not only did we have heating, but we were able to share it with people who didn't. And so you would think that would be them being grateful to us, but I'm grateful that we were able to do that. That we just, that's what our story of this whole thing is going to end up being.
Yeah.
And then I'm also grateful that shit's happening in our tribe. Like, our people are doing stuff. And I'm going to plug two of them. There are two more that I don't know if they're ready to be plugged yet, because there are things that are still kind of in the works. One of our tribe members is a coach and got her website up. I'm going to put this in the show notes, but the URL is hollymbscoach.com, and it stands for Mind, Body, Spirit. So, you know, if you go to book with Abby and she's all booked and stuff. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, no, really.
We have, but she's one of our newer members, and I'm actually in another group with her, but we're both like patrons of the group, and it's cool to like see her on some calls and then on our Zoom calls. But she actually told me about this a long time ago, and I wanted to bundle up a bunch of patron things, but then nothing else happened. But something else happened. Another one of our patrons. This is where is it? Started a podcast. And I'm going to post a thing for this on our Facebook group later. The first 4 episodes are already up, but the podcast is called The Vinyl Tap. Or This is Vinyl Tap. And it's he and a friend of his. Each episode is them talking about an entire album on vinyl, and they're going through his collection A to Z. And he's one of those people who just has like a shit ton of vinyl. So they have several seasons of stuff to go through. So the link to that will be in the show notes as well. I'm very proud of both of them. We have more people in our group who are starting more things that I will also plug as soon as they're like up and running. But I'm just I'm super grateful to be able to get a front row seat to all these things, and they're going to be the first one to find out because they're super cool and exciting. So
yes, it's awesome. It really is.
It's so cool to see. Okay.
Movers and shakers.
That's right. I want to be a shaker.
I want to be a mover.
We both just did the same thing.
We did.
I don't know if we were doing moving or shaking.
Both.
All right. Well, do you have anything else?
That's all for me today.
I think I can finally say
You've closed the chapter.
that's all for me. I won't know until we release it tomorrow morning, and I get 12 polos about it, and then,
Okay, cool.
Oh, my God. I'm a mess. Until next time, thank you for loving me. Thank you for being there.
Bye. We are grateful for you. Thank you for listening. And if you like what we're doing and you want more, then you can join our tribe to interact with other like-minded individuals. You can go through our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/True North Podcast 11.
Is it Podcast 11 or is it True North 11?
Oh, shit.
It's in our show notes. If you want more than that, you want some more hands-on healing stuff that we do. I do actual energy healing and body work, and Abby does life coaching and workshops. And you can find the URLs in our show notes when we figure out what they are.
And we are always trying to increase our reach and bring more people to find their true north. So we would really appreciate it if you could leave a review and rate it in whatever podcast platform you use.
Done. That's perfect.
What about the gratitude?
This one. Hang on. And one last thing. What are you grateful for? There. I said it. I said the thing.